You've asked to understand the difference in SentinelOne's platform and why it's DataGuard's platform of choice. So we hope today's demo will substantiate why we claim SentinelOne is superior and enables us to fully safeguard your information assets. Let's get started. So today we're going to talk about real-time unified security for the endpoint. The endpoint to us means your laptops, server machines, desktops. It's everywhere you're running code. We want to take a different approach to the virus problem, to the whole malware problem, because it's not just viruses. There's all sorts of additional components that fit into that set, including Trojans and exploits and the rest of it. So we believe that just taking the approach of looking for what you know is bad already. In other words, things you've already seen simply isn't sufficient. And we're seeing that made true by the kind of things every day on every site. New pieces of malware are getting through because they haven't been seen before, and there's no signature for them. So we believe you need complete visibility. You've got to see everything that's happening on the endpoint, and that's got to be done without any impact on performance. We've got to do that, and we've got to understand what's happening from that. So we need dynamic behavioral analysis to understand what those processes are actually doing. And with that visibility, we then need to process that information to understand what's happening. Then when we see something that's not right, we need to be able to act and act quickly. So we look for fully automated mitigations and fully automated remediation options. That's where a SentinelOne fits. Gartner Group regards SentinelOne as visionary because we were the only endpoint solution that provides prevention, detection, and response, the three sides of the security triangle in one agent. We're A/B test certified, so abtest.org has certified us as a valid antivirus replacement. We're an antivirus tool, so we can be used in any location where antivirus is required. So how's that done? In our knowledge, it's clear from the attacks we're seeing today that the endpoint is a major target, the origin of most attacks. 95% of successful breaches originate at the endpoint. Then the attack may pivot from the endpoint and move on to other targets within the organization. But 95% of them start with a breach of an endpoint device. That could be your laptop, it could be a server in the server farm, because those are the targets. They're the weakest link, especially when there's a user in front of them. We don't think antivirus, the current approach, is any match for the new threat landscape. The new threat landscape consists of many more kinds of attacks than we've previously had to deal with, or maybe more correctly said, were previously aware of. But now that we have that visibility and see the different kinds of attacks taking place, we need to be able to deal with the malware groups, ransomware, Trojans, worms, backdoor systems, that include those pieces of malware delivered as files, so that the payload is downloaded as a file object and committed to the file system locally on the endpoint, but also files memory. Today, we're seeing the number of attacks that are using fileless approaches increasing on a regular basis. Like approximately 30% of the current attacks do not include a file as the web payload delivery mechanism. You might wonder how that's done. An example of this is you going to a website that you've gone to 1,000 times, and never before has it caused you an issue, but then hackers found a weakness in it and they've seeded that website with additional code, typically in an iframe or similar components. So this time when you visit that website, you do get infected, and that infection, if they're using the techniques that many hackers are using today, will go directly into memory. It will not reach the file system. So any of the components you're using that are needed to see and look for malware in files will be defeated, which is, of course, why they're doing it. Then there are exploits. Exploits make up another 1/3 of the attacks we're seeing. So this is a case of you opening a document, a PDF file, maybe an invoice or an Excel file or a Word object, and that object contains an exploit. Maybe a buffer overflow in the way the document has been put together to cause code embedded within that document to be executed using a vulnerability within that application. So this is what's referred to as application-based exploits. Then we have the third category, live attacks, where the attacker has some form of remote access or maybe even direct keyboard access, and they are using PowerShell or WMI scripting or Visual Basic, and they will, through that, be able to escalate privilege, install additional malware, which goes back to the malware and exploits component, and pivot on that system to get further access into the rest of your network. So those are the three categories: malware, exploits, and live attacks. Conventional antivirus is going to have a problem with most of that. So that's the problem. 90% legacy antivirus vendors cannot respond fast enough. 95% of the malware that shows up is only available or in use, active in the wild, for 30 days or less. 4 out of 5 variants that we've seen lasted less than 7 days. In other words, the campaign was over, launched, and done in less than a week. That means if it takes an antivirus vendor a few days to find out about it, a few days to analyze it, a few days to create a signature for it, the ship sailed. It's too late. By the time they've created a signature and started to distribute that signature, they'll have missed the campaign. And that's what we're having to deal with now. So let's look at the different approaches that can be used to deal with this problem. We've touched on it already: legacy antivirus vendors plus their additional components. Our prevention focus, which is a good thing. Stopping it before it ever starts is always the best approach to use. Unfortunately, the attackers know about this and are ready for it. So by trying to stop things that we know about in advance, all they have to do is make sure that you don't know about it. And so by creating variants and packing the existing malware they have so that it looks different, they're able to bypass the existing antivirus mechanisms. The problem there is, in order to get a good coverage, you need to add additional components, and that's to get visibility. That often means multiple agents and more tool sets. Some forensics tools, for example, so you can verify what's happening on the endpoint, and some remediation tools to deal with the situation when the antivirus isn't able to detect it. And of course, we still suffer from the deficiency problem of the legacy-based antivirus signature technologies. Okay, so that's the legacy technology. The new technologies, which are scan-based, do predictive analysis. We'll talk about that next. It's a technique that SentinelOne is working on and has included in our product. It's the ability to scan the file system and examine those files, not just for signatures, but for characteristics within the structure of those executable files, which show that they are malware. So by carrying out a machine learning exercise, it's possible to get an understanding of the structure of files and the components within those files, which are related to malware, and through that, extend the prevention capability. This is a really good thing as well. There are problems with it, however, because in order to analyze it, you must have a file. So, of course, it's limited to file-based malware. And the algorithms themselves do need constant tuning by experts to respond to the continual changes we're seeing in the malware landscape. The third approach is to admit that the antivirus doesn't work, and therefore to look for it at its after effects. So we call it EDR, and that is detection and response. By looking at using that approach, what we do is scan the systems for indicators of compromise, IOCs, and use that approach to examine what has happened on the system and look for things that we can do about it. This has no prevention mechanism. It relies on other tools in place, other agents, other mechanisms. Example is legacy antivirus is a mechanism for understanding and preventing what's going on. Also, it requires specialized personnel to operate a security operations center to carry out that search and mitigation, remediation, and forensics. So it's a more complicated, extensive approach, but we'll look at the 3 mechanisms together: prevention, analysis, and detection, and the ability to have search and response together. That forms an interesting approach to the problem. Of course, if you do that with multiple vendors, that's going to be expensive and complicated to manage. If we distill that into the principles, what we then have is the approach of pre-execution, on-execution, and post-execution processing. In other words, prevention, detection, response, the security triangle. This is what SentinelOne provides. We provide pre-execution protection, and that's cloud intelligence, which is our own intelligence service, constantly updating the agents with whitelist and blacklist items, blacklist being signatures of known bad malware. So when we know it's bad, we don't let it run. On top of that, we have advanced static prevention. In other words, we do deep file inspection, allowing us to determine from the structure of a file if we believe it's going to be a particular malware. So we have static signature-based technologies and static pre-executed file analysis. But more than that, we have on execution. We know that the attackers are constantly finding a way over, under, through, around the defenses and prevention mechanisms we put in place. So it's important that we have something that works at the point where the malware can no longer hide. This is our dynamic malware detection and dynamic exploit detection, what we refer to as the behavioral analysis. So this is at the point of execution. We examine exactly what's going on. We track everything on the system. We build a picture of context of everything that's happening on the system. From that, we're able to determine, based on machine learning exercise, what is the malware that's taking place based on its runtime characteristics? What is it doing on the system? And at that point, once we determine that it is malware, then we're able to hand it over to our post-execution capabilities, which includes automated mitigation, policy-based remediation, and forensics. And all of this is provided in a single agent. That's something that we're going to be showing you in a moment. So, looking at the platform approach that we built, we have dynamic whitelisting and blacklisting, updated continually by Cloud Intelligence Service. And that blocks known bad files that we're constantly updating, just like other antivirus vendors. We also have another prevention mechanism in that layer, and that is the deep file inspection. That's the static analysis of executables before they are allowed to run. And that allows us to determine a whole other group of malware. That is limited, of course, to files. If you don't have a file, you have nothing to analyze. But it is a useful tool in that prevention mechanism. We then move to the execution phase, and this is our dynamic behavioral analysis. We manage and monitor all memory, all the time, all activity, all processes, communication, network activity, all of it. And we do that with an agent that does this with little impact on the system. Our agent is typically about 17 megabytes of memory, and less than 4% of CPU on average throughout its running day. So it's a very small, lightweight agent. And that helps us deal with all other categories of malware files, memory-based malware, because you see it in memory and we see its behaviors. And we see interaction with processes in the operating system. And of course, because they all run in memory, we're able to monitor and see exploits taking place and script-based attacks. So we see everything that's happening on the system. And as soon as we see the behaviors in combination that tells us it's malware, we then move to our automated policy-based response mitigations, like killing the processes, quarantining the files, and we also have the ability to disconnect the device from the network, to isolate it, to quarantine the device itself, or on the basis of policy, we have remediation. Because we're operating at the point of execution, we also need to be able to deal with the situation of malware that's done something on the device. So of course we have remediation, the ability to undo the damage that is carried out on the system, and that includes rollback. So with the rollback, we can restore the whole system to its state before the malware began to run. On top of that, we also have auto-immunization, which means that we can detect something dynamically on one device, tell all of the other devices about it, and that feeds to their local blacklist, meaning that they would not run it if they see it. So that's the platform approach that we've built. The management server itself is cloud-based. As I mentioned, we have lightweight agents for Mac, Linux, and Windows. That's Windows Server Editions and Linux Server Editions. So to summarize, what we have is a multi-layered protection across all major threat vectors. We provide full visibility, and through that, we also have dynamic whitelisting and blacklisting to reduce the overall attack surface. And we then have static prevention, deep file inspection engine, to uncover the known and unknown malware before it starts to execute. We do recognize that that won't be enough because not all malware is delivered as a file. And it is for that reason we have the behavior-based threat detection at the point of execution, allowing us to see everything that's happening on the system. A little more on that deep file inspection. It's a major breakthrough for us in the signature list detection within our system. It uses an analysis we've carried out on millions of samples of known good and known bad malware. And that's allowed us to determine about 31,000 plus unique file characteristics, which allows us to distill that into an algorithm, which means the endpoint agent can make that analysis before a file is run at high speed. In fact, our deep file inspection engine examines files at the point they're dropped on the system. So as soon as they touch the file system, they can be examined and supported on all endpoint platforms, Windows, Mac, Linux. And the engine supports all other mitigation actions. So what we also have in the agent is that visibility, full context forensics, so we can see everything that has happened on the system and everything that is happening on the system using our forensics tools. And that's in the same agent on all platforms, giving us a very light footprint on the system, yet still with significant capabilities in terms of visibility through to the management service. We'll look at that in a bit. As I mentioned earlier, we also have that policy-based response capability. So in this, we can see here, actions can include just alert if we wish, alert and kill, alert, kill, and quarantine of known malware or unknown malware at the point of detection. We also see in the policy the option for autoimmune that allows us to tell other components in our network about unknown malware that we've detected. And additionally, to alter automatic disconnect from the network to manual disconnect to quarantine one device at the point malware is determined. The choice of which policies you apply is entirely up to you. The policies themselves can be different for different groups. So we have groups of devices. Each group has its own policy built into that cloud intelligence. That allows us to constantly update the endpoint with relevant information about new malware types as soon as they're determined and found, to include their behaviors. So to quickly summarize before we move to the demo, we have superior detection based on advanced threats without much performance overhead. And that's important to us and to you. We needed to make it lightweight on the endpoint. Everyone's fed up of having antivirus hog the system. Secondly, automated threat mitigation at machine speed. We don't believe telling you you've got a problem and waiting for a human to deal with it should be sufficient. It needs to happen rapidly. Third, we have the ability to carry out forensics to visualize that attack in real time so we can see and understand what's happening in the system. And through our cloud-based intelligence, or continuously, seamlessly update the endpoints with the latest threats. Fifth, by combining multiple functions in one agent, we're able to cut the total cost of this solution by up to 5 times over multi-solution approaches. And that's before we even look at the cost of managing training and looking at the different systems. Sixth, we're able to protect user endpoints and data center servers with a single platform. And seventh, our solution is easily deployable across all size business environments. We're certified for use in HIPAA and PCI environments, and our platform has captured the confidence of the #1 retailer in the world, Walmart, and the #1 internet television network provider, Netflix. SentinelOne's a recognized Gartner Caesar visionary. They're also smart enough to recognize that nobody in this game can possibly get it right all the time. If you come in contact with anyone who says they'll stop everything all the time, they cannot. Today's cyber criminal will inevitably find their way around defenses you put in place. So recognizing this, we are thrilled that SentinelOne provides a cyber insurance guarantee of up to $1,000 per affected endpoint, up to a total of $1 million. And that is for any affected endpoint if we're not able to return a customer system to a working state. That is a confident platform provider, to be sure. DataGuard 365 owners were really deliberate in their choice of SentinelOne as the platform for our cyber solution, and they've paid what it costs for the deepest dark web visibility and the expertise of our team members at DataGuard to deliver all the components that our DataGuard 365 solution encompasses. Now it's time for you to see the SentinelOne platform in action.
Okay, time for a demonstration. Here's the cloud-based management interface and login. We have two-factor authentication, so I'll just put my additional information code in here, stored on my device. Okay, all right. We can see the system is showing that we have no current problems. I do have 18 systems that have agents out of date. So if I click on that over there, I can see that some of those agents need updating. I'll deal with that later. But I have 0 infections currently. This is the dashboard, the working list for anybody responsible for responding to anything that may be happening on the site or the SOC. And if they saw something here, that means the policy on the endpoint was alert only or alert and kill. Consider something that's been killed as still has the potential to run again. So it's only been killed, then it's based upon policy, then it's still there to be examined and analyzed. So, okay. We have mitigated most of our policies to be alert, kill, and quarantine, so we would see most events here. And of course, we know what block means. It was detected either by signature-based analysis or execution or by file inspection engine before it ran. So those are what those categories would say. Activity further down. This is our log file. Just shows everything that's happening on the system, and we can filter it to look for views exactly what's happening here. We see a particular laptop has gone offline here. Here's one coming online. This allows us to go back and carry forensics on previous events in our system, so we can go in with these with those. And I'm sure forensic on a live piece, so I want to show you just that. When we have network, it shows all the systems and the groups that we have are looking after. And in fact, one of these systems, if I go down to UK development, it's Tony demo to Windows 7. That in fact is this system right here. This is the Windows system over here, and we can see from that in the UK development group, the UK development policy. So let's have a look at policy. Okay. Okay, policy UK development. It's certainly currently set to alert, kill, and quarantine. I'm going to modify that because I want us to be able to see the forensics. So I'm going to change it to alert only. Now it's a really strange thing to do, but I'll switch off disconnect from the network as well. So this is really a policy that's not going to do anything. I'll save that. Policy change will apply in the next 10 seconds or so. So this is set to alert only. And that means I'm going to let the malware run all the way through so that we can take a look at the forensics capabilities and so we can see what the malware did. That's something I'd advise anybody to do if you're not familiar with malware. So alert only is how it's set at the moment. It's going back to the network. I can click on Tony and I can get quite a lot of information about that device already. What version of operating system it's got, how much RAM it's got, what version of agent it's currently installed on it. And I can see it's online and the network is enabled from here. I can also see which applications are installed on the system, and of course any running processes that are currently on the system as well. So even before any event takes place, I can carry out various forensics. So we're going to go over to the Windows device there. Now remember, this is alert only, so any malware is going to be allowed to run all the way through. So what I'm going to do is look at some malware samples I got over here. See, it's in a folder here. A little special brand here. So I open up pictures, for example. Now, everything I'm doing right now is being watched all the time by the DataGuard 365 agent. So its behavior is what it's watching, really. And at the moment, it's not really guarded because I haven't done anything malicious or opened any folder or looked at anything, some pictures that hasn't created any malicious activity. What I'm going to do now, though, however, is I'm going to open some malware samples. Let's see here. Okay, these are password protected on my computer here, so I'll one of these on the system. Of course, that's enough right there to defeat a lot of antivirus sweeps. Of course, because it's an encrypted file, they can't see what's in it. So, first of all, I'm going to run the virus here on the payload. So it's a file object. In this case, payloads. It's often used and delivered as part of a drive-by attack when you visit various websites. So I'm running it as though it's going to a website. So if you go to the website, open the website, and that's the threat. Was detected and blocked straight away. There it is. So this was known. This is bad, already known as bad executable. It blocks straight away, just like the antivirus component would do. If I analyze it, it's going to give me very much. See, not going to give very much. It shows me basically nothing happened. It didn't do anything, but here we can see that it was known as a high risk, and there was its signature. Could take a signature and go examine it on another platform to understand what it was and what was prevented. Let's see here. The reason we love this, of course, interested to know what's going on happening at your site. And if there's ever a proliferation of malware suddenly appearing on the site, it could indicate that an event is taking place. Maybe there's a concerted attempt to breach your network. Its own. That's one's not to worry. So many marks of results. All finished as far as malware event concerned, and we turn the interface to normal. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run AlphaCrypt instead. Now, AlphaCrypt is not a known piece of malware. It's part of the current malware campaign. It's ransomware. What it will do is to attempt to encrypt all the files on my system, and because it's not got a signature, if they produce new versions of it every week, it will not be detected by the block mechanism. So I'm going to run this and detect it, hopefully, as part of as a malicious component. So as part of the behavior, basically. In fact, we're at that point. If they had a policy that was kill and quarantine, we would already have stopped this malware. It would have been killed and quarantined, and the alert generated would have appeared and mitigated. However, I have the policy set to alert only to allow us to carry out the forensics. So here on the system, it's still running, and it wants to delete shadow copy service. So I'm going to say yes to that, because a typical user wouldn't know what that means. And that's it. Now we have a typical ransomware component here. My pictures, my Excel files, all of that's going to PDF. Here, all those things have been encrypted. Now I get this message on the screen with a demand for Bitcoin to be paid within a certain time period, 95 hours in this case. So back over here, this allows me to show off the forensics capability. If I do analyze, we can see where the file is. It's on this particular drive, and it's in this directory. It was on the desktop. You can see there's not much information about it. It was an unknown piece of malware, so it was detected by behavioral, what it did, and behavior analysis. Okay. We can see it made connections. So it made 2 connections here in the US, then 2 to the UK, and 1 Germany, 2 to Romania. So we can see the behavior demonstrated that made us catch on it was basically made us understand it was malware. Some network activity, stealthiness, anti-detections, exploitation, persistence, etc., etc. So these are the kind of behaviors we saw at the runtime that made us think it's malware. We go to the attack storyline. I can see that this is me running Explorer. I ran AlphaCrypt. Alpha started to run. I created a copy of it. So it created a copy of itself. Then it command shell, and then it ran the command shell in the background. And that command shell used to delete the original copy, and then created a new executable. And that executable was then used to attack the virtual shadow copy service. So here's what it went. Here's where it went for the files on my system. So it's moving files, writing to files, modifying files. I can see exactly which components were touched by the system. In fact, we have full forensics. If we go to the bottom, we have the full raw data of everything that was happening during the attack, and that can be downloaded very simply, very easily. That's stuff here. The information. That can be downloaded in different formats for analysis here, and any other tools you wish to use for analysis or whatever. I've seen enough. I can see that this is malware. This begs the question: is there anything that we can do about it? So here's the user. Remember, policy was alert only. It didn't attempt to kill or quarantine because I didn't tell it to do it. So if I go back to here, what options do I have in terms of actions? I could manually carry out any action that could have been in the automatic policy, kill, quarantine, remediation, or rollback. In this case, because we've lost files, it's clear we're going to need to use rollback. So what I'm going to do here is carry out the rollback. Okay, rollback operation. So here on the endpoint, it will kill the running process. It's not just the initial process, but any additional processes that will run. It will contain the component to prevent it from running again. You'll see it disappear from the desktop, and it will also remediate and roll back the system. If it ever tried to restart it, no, it wouldn't let it. So we have all of our files back. The system is back in good state. By the way, even the desktop has actually been recovered. And if I do a restart, the desktop will go back to normal. It's a peculiarity of Windows. When you change the desktop, it doesn't apply until either the user logs off or you restart the computer. Okay. All right, back to our interface, we can see that the event was mitigated. So it moved to a mitigated state. And as that rollback action, kill, quarantine, remediate, or rollback was carried out. And there it is on the interface. And the Apollo, I see a little quarantine. There it was. You could see events take place, and you see most of them blocked and mitigated. Only if you had an alert or an alert and kill policy would you see anything appear active. So that's it. It's a demonstration of capabilities, certainly. We like the fact that the artificial intelligence, along with the behavioral, can detect viruses that aren't known and offset them. Normally, at that second instance I gave would have been a ransomware where you're trying to hunt down as far as pay a ransom. In this case, you roll it back and you're right back to business. Don't lose a bit of time. So, if you have any questions, the board pop up here with the address, name and everything for the company, DataGuard 365. I appreciate your time.